The Dusk is not a place of mercy. It's a soot-choked, demon-infested, ghost-riddled monument to wealth and decay. A place where the rich feast while the poor rot. Inky black seas that drive men mad, ghosts that haunt every quiet corner. It's stuffed with corruption, violence, and all manner of twisted souls that flood the street. And you, my dear scoundrel, you are one of them. Welcome to Blades in the Dark, a grim fantasy tabletop role-playing game by John Harper and Evil Hat Productions. Today, I'll be guiding you through the best that this game has to offer and adding in some of my own experiences along the way. But what is Blades in the Dark? At its core, Blades is a grimy, spooky, crime-filled tabletop role-playing game. You and your crew of scoundrels run schemes, steal from the powerful, and claw your way up the criminal food chain in the haunted streets of Duskfall. It is a perfect fit for game masters who love underworld stories, for players itching to unleash chaotic plans, or really anybody who's watched Peaky Blinders and thought, oh, I want to do that. But fair warning, this is not your standard tabletop role-playing game, because while it shares storytelling elements from other games, it plays pretty differently. If you're coming from D&D, Pathfinder, or even Lancer, expect a bit of a learning curve, but one that pays off very quickly. I won't be covering everything this game has to offer though, just the meaty bits and a little bit more. Because after teaching about a dozen players how to play, I've more than earned my stripes. With introductions out of the way, let me introduce mission number 1, steal his grandmother. Yep, you heard me right, I said what I said. Picture this. Our scrappy little crew has been working under just any powerful criminal faction for a while now. They're scraping by, they're barely making ends meet. But they're the underdogs of our story today. All of them are green and filled with ambition. Their super cool secret base of operations? A crumbling library that's held together with hope and dreams. And just as soon as they're almost ready to get their bearings, that's when an all-out turf war breaks loose. And if they can't pick a side and quickly, there might not be a neighborhood left to do scoundrelly stuff in. But for the scoundrels in question, them choosing a faction wasn't that hard. The Crows were obviously the hottest and best group around. And after meeting their leader, they're given their very first mission: kidnap the beloved grandmother of local low-level kingpin, Bazo Baz. All they have to do is hold her for a few hours and meet the Crows at the drop-off point tomorrow at midnight. Yeah, granny napping, I know. It's whatever it takes to keep the lights on, okay? The economy's in shambles over here in the dusk. But the plan is simple. They're gonna grab her during the transfer, pretend to be some of Bazo's guys, walk right into Crow's territory, and everything will be fine. Well, that was the plan until it was time to go shopping. See, Grandma isn't just some sweet old lady in a rocking chair. She's loaded up with a schedule, and she wasn't gonna let anybody or anything like security concerns stop her. I'm talking bakery stops, dress shops, neighborhood gossiping tours, you name it, she wanted the full experience, and nobody was gonna stop her. And our scoundrels, well, they have to play along or they risk blowing their cover. Cue the awkward stroll through Charter Hall to Crowsfoot, making pit stops like they're running Saturday night errands. One moment they're nodding along about sourdough, and the next they're holding up a mirror at the tailor shop while pretending that they definitely work for her beloved grandson. And they're sweating bullets the entire time. Every friendly, "Oh, hello there," is a potential disaster. Meanwhile, Grandma is living her best life. She's happier than she's been in years. And the story gets worse from here. Or, from my perspective, it got way better. The day passes and she is tuckered out from a day of adventuring. And they have nowhere to put her. They don't know where to go, so they decide, in their genius, to bring her back to their super-duper secret hideout, the crumbling old library. Even though she can barely hear them or even see them, they're the most fun bodyguards she has ever had. Mission success? technically, I mean, they got there on time, but a flawless operation? Absolutely not. Just about 30 people have actually seen them and Bazo's grandmother together, and now their secret base of operations is probably no longer a secret. But it was hilarious watching my group of veteran D&D adventurers blunder and sputter over every little interaction. Each little conversation was a potential explosion of consequence. Every alley a possible problem that they really needed to pay attention to. You had to have been there to see it. And sure, eventually they did manage to get to the deadline, they dropped her off in the safety of the crows, and finally they put an end to the turf war with one single kidnapped grandmother. But the real focus of our story isn't actually what happened, or how funny it was. It's the who's, where's, and why's that make this game so amazing. You see, Blades in the Dark divides its city into 12 districts, each packed with key people, factions, and story beats. This mission took place in Crowsfoot, a hotspot with 3 major factions constantly at each other's throats. And one Bazo Baz runs the Lamp Blacks, arguably the sleaziest of the 3, at least in my game's version of the canon. And when they succeeded at their job, the players gained faction status with the Crows, moving from +1, friendly, to +2, real buddies, allowing them more respect, more favors, and quite the pretty penny for their efforts. But Bazo and his gang? Oh, he did not take kindly to the whole grandma napping. When he unraveled who stole his precious grandmother and what cost him the turf war, the group's faction status with the Lamp Blacks shattered from neutral 0 to full-blown war -3. Now Bazo's goons are gunning for the crew and any crow who sent them. And at just about any cost as well. Sure, because he lost the faction war, he's not nearly as powerful as he was, but he is not gonna forget who stole his grandmother. And you know what's so beautiful about this? It was really easy to do all this, and it all comes from the structure of the game. Blades in the Dark makes faction relationships very clear, simple, and very reactive. This system is a godsend for game masters who struggle with creating things out of the blue. Each district, faction, and notable figure has a purpose, place, and alliance. Everything your players are going to touch, rob, or blow up actually belongs to somebody or some faction, and those people are going to remember who's friend and who's foe. Now, I am generalizing. Not every object in the city is owned, because you do have a little bit of homework when it comes to filling in the small details of certain groups without real backstories, but overall, it's very clear that even with minimal writing, the world is painted very well for such a small book. But how could I even forget? When we're talking about this game and the setting itself, it's haunted. Literally, there's spirits and ghosts out there. They're torn from the mortal coil, and they lash out blindly at anyone unlucky enough to be nearby. There's demons and devils out there, from hells that no one understands. They whisper twisted promises to the last sane people still clinging to their wits. The ocean? It's an abyss of black, inky water, surrounded by nothing but darkness on every side. The sky? Nope, just as bleak, perpetually dark, 24 hours a day. Only the moon and its milky silver light shines every so often. The sun is nothing but a fantasy ever since the great calamity that shattered the sun and ripped open the gates of the underworld. The city itself is run on Leviathan blood. The rain mutates people. Lightning barriers hum 24/7 to keep the ghosts at bay. And all the while, the crime syndicates and the rich little monsters at the tippy top keep the gears turning. They keep them crushing all those who work day in, day out to keep the machine of humanity barely running for one more lightless day. It's horror, it's action, it's crime, comedy, realism, fantasy, romance, tragedy, sometimes all in the same session. It's everything, it's more, it's fantastic, wonderful, amazing. So yeah, go get yourself a copy, like right now. Whew. Although, I suppose, like with all great things made by mortal hands, Blades does come with its own set of problems. This book is not that big. The faction list is very good, but also pretty short. Each group gets just enough flavor to get you started. But when the city starts shifting because of your crew's actions, it's up to the game master to fill in the blanks. And that can get tricky very quick when you're juggling new allegiances, burned bridges, and whatever flavor of chaos your players cooked up last week. And as much as I love the open world vibe, it can feel a little directionless at times. You get a taste of the world immediately with this quick tutorial, and then bam, dropped into the deep end with nothing more than a character sheet and a lot of confusion on where you're at. It's easy to get overwhelmed by the rules, the names, the clocks, the mechanics, but once you find your rhythm, this game really sings. But for me, this is where things got complicated in the best of ways. You see, I wasn't just running a single Blades in the Dark game, I was running two. I was juggling 2 full-length campaigns every week, multiple hour sessions, each with their own crews, chaos, and questionable decision-making. And I didn't want them to be separate either. I wanted this to be one shared city, one timeline, one living world where every broken window and botched heist rippled across both games. And to pull it off, I needed some help. Big shout out to my buddy Eldenme, because with his help, we both created a fully functioning hub where players could track the evolving city day after day, and I could keep a tight grip on all the gears that were turning behind the scenes. Using Discord to organize chats, roles, and voice channels, we made a space filled with information and living updates that characters could influence game by game. Even the major factions had their own spaces where I tracked their holdings, their relationships, recent events, and who they were beefing with, which honestly at some point it was kind of everybody for themselves. But players were given roles and access to channels based only on what their crew knew, kind of like a digital fog of war. It created this perfect level of intentional misinformation, where even the players had to figure out to what level they actually knew their allies. They had to figure out what plans were in motion inside the very same Discord group they were a part of. Key NPCs were cataloged from major players to shady informants. Even mundane things like shopkeepers, landlords, animal sightings, they all got slotted in every so often. A new thread at my disposal to weave into this beautiful tapestry of a world that all of us were building. And once the week's chaos wrapped up and came to a close, I had to assess how much damage was done. I'd sit down and sift through the wreckage. Every fire, fight, deal, and double cross. If it left a mark on the city, I made a note. And from that pile of scribbled madness, I'd actually build one of the most important parts of this entire system. A weekly, in-universe newspaper. And it wasn't just a recap, it was the Duskfall News, twisted through the lens of gossip, bias, faulty witnesses, and good old bureaucratic indifference. It was a way that the city was talking to the players, a way for the world to speak its truth, even if it was one stuffed with misinformation and red herrings. Sometimes events were reported exactly as they happened, but more often than not even close. A brutal stabbing might be seen by someone across the canal who only caught a glimpse, so their version ends up describing the players of Group A all wrong. A warehouse explosion led by Group B gets chalked up to a leaky gas line instead of violent sabotage. A gang leader's grandmother disappearing into the night? Well, that's just the turf war suddenly and peacefully coming to a close with the surrender of the Lamp Black gang. Like, all of this information quickly became something that my players looked forward to. They'd scan every line. They tried to figure out which parts were connected to their missions and which ones were tied to the other group's missions. The fun wasn't just getting the facts, it was interpreting them. It created this constant hum of background motion, a movement that the players could never ignore for long. Gangs were making moves, politics were shifting, and threats were bubbling up, and someone, somewhere, was gonna be making headlines. And because I twisted every article through the lens of faction bias, rumor, or hearsay, the players never had a perfect view. They had to dig, investigate, and constantly question what they thought they knew. Every perfectly executed plan could be a potential problem down the road. It turned Duskfall into more than a backdrop. It made it feel like an active participant in the game. Investigations could be held, enemies could pop up at every turn, small mistakes could balloon into massive problems. It was amazing to see this little game blossom into a full-fledged story. And this ritual I had of taking notes and spinning them into fictional newspapers was probably the most effective world-building tool I've ever used. But hey, not every mission has to be a turf war or a faction-level Fallout. Sometimes all you need to be successful is a little theft. Which brings us to mission number 2, a painting of certain proportions. At this point in the campaign, the crew had earned themselves a reputation. They were reliable, quick, and they did jobs effectively. But with a certain grandson on their tail, bluecoats now sniffing in their direction, and their enemies growing in number, they needed to score big and fast. Asking at every opportunity for quiet jobs, one with high payoff but also low profile, eventually they hit the jackpot. The Dimmer sisters of all people approached them with the perfect score. Infiltrate a swanky little art show, steal a very specific painting, and get out without a trace. Simple and totally perfect for our burglars in the making. They would need to be very careful for this mission. Actually, in fact, they're gonna have to pull this one off without a hitch. So, stop me if you've heard this one before. You and your friends all sit down for your favorite flavor of tabletop role-playing games for another jam-packed session. And for the few times that the group doesn't just charge headlong into danger and consequence, they actually spend hours debating and arguing about the best approach on how to perform a new type of war crime that technically isn't listed yet. Just for those plans that they spent hours making to inevitably fall apart the moment somebody makes a dice roll. I personally get very frustrated when a game slows to a crawl in these moments, and more so when the time I invest in a plan simply falls apart due to RNG or a player not listening at all. But luckily, Blades in the Dark comes with a simple and honestly revolutionary fix for just this reason. And that fix is the flashback system, a tool to keep the game moving full steam ahead no matter how complicated the mission becomes. Because when a plan begins to unravel, a surprise is sprung, or a dice roll just evolves into a full-fledged problem, the flashback system is the perfect opportunity for players to fully steer this chaotic event in their favor. By invoking a flashback, a player can use it to perform an action in the past to directly affect the current event before them. Now, this doesn't change what's happening in the moment, but it will change the context surrounding that event, allowing for some crazy shenanigans. Now, let's bring this back to the art show and really put it into frame on how it's going to work. Art joke? Haha. So, the crew arrives at this obnoxiously posh event. Think champagne towers, suspiciously quiet jazz, stuffy nobles, and one too many monocles. The point of entry? The front entrance. Well, after all, why waste the tickets the Dimmer sisters gave them? Looking around with disguises intact, everything thus far seems maybe manageable? Well, that is until they notice all the extra security on every single painting. Just their luck. Now, normally this would trigger panic, arguing, 15 plans of increasingly violent proportions. But instead, one of the players leans in and goes, "Hey, I'd actually like to have a flashback here. I know the blue coat out front. I bought him a few too many drinks a couple nights back, and he actually told me all about this new security system." So what's really happening here is that the player in question wants to use the very guards themselves that are outside to his advantage and disable the new security system in place. Now, this security system doesn't just disappear, it's still going to be there. It's a challenge for the players to conquer. But now, it will come with context. The game master and player are allowed to roleplay out a quick little scene. Imagine it with me. A late-night drinking session, two new friends sharing some top-shelf brandy, loud music, the smell of smoke, some small talk, The guard gets drunk and eventually lets something slip. It turns out if you cut the power, there's a ridiculous 10-second gap before the backup kicks in. It'd be just enough time for somebody to grab a painting if they wanted to. And that's exactly what the crew does. The crew spreads out, knocks out the guards nearest to the breaker box, and just as a partygoer raises his glass to a toast to civility, boom! Total darkness. The mark gets snatched, chaos erupts, and they make a break for it, scattering into the night with their reward in hand. And by the time the lights go back up and the guards realize what's happening, it's too late. And the best part, the whole thing felt earned. That entire scene that was played on table was amazing, and it didn't take 3 real-life hours to plan it all out. They reacted, they adapted, and they used the tools Blades in the Dark gave them to steer the chaos rather than tame it. Flashbacks easily made running the game far more enjoyable, since it really felt like it gave the ability to the players to have more agency over the story itself. It made the collaborative storytelling aspect of this game feel much more impactful and real to me and the players. And performing a flashback cost a level of stress equal to the prompt presented. In this example, you can imagine stress as your sanity bar. For 0 stress, a flashback that makes enough sense to have already been done, or without any effort from the player, is completely free. Now, while 2 or more stress is something completely unbelievable and exceedingly difficult to have set up prior to this event. While these flashbacks are time manipulation in one way or another, they're not always so cut and dry. Some will require a player to not only set up a scene, but also participate in that scene with an action role. Flashbacks are amazing. I love this rule in particular, and highly encourage game masters to look into this game just based on this rule alone. And this isn't the only tool that Blades in the Dark has to offer. Some other focuses for our little walkthrough are stress, clocks, roles, and playbooks. The real guts of how this game plays out once you're in it. You can imagine stress is basically your mental pressure gauge. The more you push yourself, physically, emotionally, ghostly, the more stress you pile up. And when that bar fills, trauma. Your character breaks. Do it enough times and that scoundrel is out of the story. Permanently. It's a really slick way of making choices feel risky without needing to kill characters off every session. Sure, you can survive the fight, but if you're not careful, you're not going to walk away as the same person. Clocks are your progress trackers. These satisfying little circles get filled in over time. You'll use them for jobs, projects, dangers, goals, you name it, clock it. Short clocks, long clocks, rival gang clocks, whatever it is, the more pieces you fill, the closer you are to something changing, good or bad. As a game master, it's a super easy way to track the progress a faction is making to a hard-to-accomplish goal. For players, it's a wonderful reminder of what your next downtime is going to be consisting of. And honestly, I use them in most of my games now, not just Blades. Playbooks are basically your classes. They're the skills, they're the flavor, the drama, the spark. You're not just a fighter, you're the cutter who solves problems with fists and fury. You're the slide who sweet talks their way into places that they really shouldn't be in. You pick your playbook and that becomes your angle, your toolkit for crime and chaos. Now, here's where things start getting weird. We gotta talk about dice rolls, and specifically the position and effect rulings. So let's say you're gonna do something stupid. Probably cool as well, but it probably is gonna be stupid. You roll a handful of 6-sided dice based on your skill, gear, prep, health, stress, and whatever tools you've managed to scrape together. Your highest dice value rolled determines the outcome of that event. You rolled your highest number as a 6? Well, congrats, you nailed it. 4 or 5 is your highest number? Yeah, you did the thing, but there's gonna be a complication. 1 to a 3 was your best? Oof. You messed up and things are gonna get hairy. But here's the catch, not every roll is built the same. Before the dice even hit the table, the GM says 2 very fun, very vague little words. Your position and your effect. Now, if you're new, this is usually where your brain starts melting out of your skull, but don't worry, I'm here to help. Position is how bad it'll be if you screw this up. If you are in a controlled position, it means that things are chill, you're safe, and it'll probably go well if you succeed. If you're in a risky position, this is the standard. Something might go wrong, but you'll probably live. But if you're in a desperate position, that means, well, you better have your last words ready. And it's not about how difficult something is, it's how dangerous failure becomes. You can try the exact same action in all 3 positions and get a totally different flavor of, oh no. And then we get to effect, and this is where most people get as confused as when you see a runaway goat cart. Yes, horses are rare in the dusk. They use giant goats instead of horses. Don't ask. Effect is what happens if you succeed on the roll. This isn't just a you win, you lose scenario, it's how much impact your action is going to have. Do you have limited effect? Well, if you succeed, you're gonna barely succeed. The guard gets injured from your attack, but they're not knocked down. But what if you're at standard effect? Well, this is your normal success. It's about what you expect for your action. Great effect? Well, that's awesome! So now you have these 2 sliders. One for how bad it'll be if I fail, and the other for how much do I get if I pull this off. And suddenly, every single action feels loaded with tension. Like, this describes the event far more clearly than anything else. And then, if the Game Master is feeling really spicy, they toss in a devil's bargain. You want some extra dice for that roll? Maybe you want better effect, or what about a better position? Cool, wish granted, you get it. But, if you take it, now that faction you're beefing with, well, they know you're here. Or maybe the job you're working on gets messy, fast. Or maybe someone innocent gets caught in the crossfire. You can say no to a devil's bargain, but do you? That bonus dice or position or effect could literally be the difference between this entire operation failing or succeeding. The temptation is so tangible, and every time I use this and I offer it to my players, I watch them salivate at the reward and debate its cost. Is it worth it? Maybe, depends on how your game master treats the consequence. Maybe not, though. Depends on how badly you want this win, and that's what makes Blades in the Dark so creative. The rolls don't just decide success or failure. It's not a DC that you have to meet. They shape the entire scene. They ask, how risky is this? What is it worth to you? How far are you willing to go? But I have to say, if you're running these games online, especially through Roll20, Roll20 has an excellent extension for it. In fact, I actually ended up buying the book and the extension on Roll20. It does have a little bit of a learning curve, but between the maps, the tokens, the clocks, and the tools, it's just amazing. You need to go get it if you're going to get it that way. And no, I'm not actually sponsored by Roll20, but, I'd love to be. Anyways, it's been real. Thanks for listening to me ramble about Blades in the Dark for, 30 minutes, but whatever the timer says at this point, I can't see it in the recording booth. I know I skipped over a ton of things like character creation, deep dives into the factions, smaller rules and edge cases, but I really wanted to focus on showing you the parts of the game that really make it great, the parts that bring it to life, the things that made me fall in love with it in the first place. I would highly recommend any game master looking for real changes in their own games to take a page or 2 of notes here. This is a goldmine of wonderful concepts and rules that you can stitch into your own games with very little problem. So if this video really got you interested, go get yourself a copy of Blades in the Dark. Once again, Blades in the Dark by John Harper and Evil Hat Productions. Go out there, my scoundrels, build a crew, steal something stupid, and don't forget to have a great time while doing so. And for those of you who watched this one all the way through, I really appreciate it. Hand over heart, it makes a lot of difference when it comes to how far this video is going to actually end up going. The algorithm has not been very gentle to me recently, especially for my D&D content, but I know I have it in me to make more, so don't worry, I'm still going to kick some ass and make some more videos, so don't you worry your pretty little heads. For anybody brand new here or anybody recurring, go ahead and make sure you've hit that subscribe button, that one right there, yep. And if you love seeing my videos, you can actually catch me live at Twitch over at ThatTurtleGM. I actually made this really cool Twitch bot that does like D&D stuff. You can pick your own class, it'll track your XP, you can earn gold, you can fight bosses, you can get items. It's really cool, and you can play for free while I'm streaming. It's awesome. You should really go check it out sometime if you can catch me live. In addition to that, if you like this kind of content, I have plenty of other stuff on my YouTube channel. I cover D&D, I cover Lancer, I do a bunch of other goofy stuff, I cover spells. Anything you can think of, I've probably at least dabbled in it. Sorry for the rambling, it's really hot. I think I've got like stage 3 heat stroke or something. I'm sweating like no other. This recording booth is toasty. But for now, I think I'm gonna go work on something else. This video has taken me literally an eternity to make. I think I started working on the script in like January, and I just now got it done. So I'm gonna see y'all later. Thanks for watching. Sorry about the rambling. Thanks again. Thank you 3 times, 4 times even, and see you later.